You sit in a room full of people, and somehow you still feel invisible. The conversations continue around you. Everyone seems to find their place so naturally, while you quietly wonder why every connection in your life feels temporary. You have tried to fit in. You have smiled when you wanted to cry. You have listened when no one seemed willing to hear your own heart. You have prayed prayers that never left your lips, because you were too exhausted to explain them one more time. Deep inside, there is a question that keeps returning no matter how many times you try to silence it. Why does everyone else seem to belong somewhere while I always end up standing alone? Perhaps you have watched friendships slowly disappear without any dramatic reason. Perhaps people once called you every day, but now months pass without hearing your name. Maybe you have walked away from places that once felt like home because something inside you could no longer pretend you belonged there. The hardest part is not the loneliness itself. It is wondering whether there is something wrong with you, whether you are too quiet, too sensitive, too different, too complicated, too much for some people, and somehow never enough for others. There are nights when you replay conversations over and over, searching for the mistake that made people drift away. You blame yourself for relationships that slowly faded. You wonder if changing your personality would finally make people stay. Yet every attempt to become someone else leaves you feeling even more disconnected than before. There is a loneliness that comes from having no one around you. But there is another kind that hurts even more. It is the loneliness of feeling misunderstood by people who stand right beside you. It is smiling through family gatherings while secretly wondering why no one seems to recognize the battle taking place inside your heart. It is hearing people say you are strong when in reality you are simply tired. Tired of pretending. Tired of carrying burdens no one else notices. Tired of waiting for life to finally make sense. If this season feels familiar, let me know in the comments by writing "I understand." Sometimes the first step toward healing is discovering that someone else recognizes the road you have been walking. The scriptures often describe seasons when faithful people experienced profound isolation, not because isolation itself was the goal, but because difficult seasons became places where trust, perseverance, and character were formed. That does not mean every lonely season is a direct message from God or proof that someone has been specially selected. Life is more complex than that. Yet many believers have found comfort in the thought that God can work even through experiences that feel empty, confusing, or painful. Consider how often growth begins in places that no one envies. Seeds are buried before they rise. Gold is refined through fire. Muscles become stronger through resistance. These images remind us that transformation is rarely comfortable. Perhaps that is why your present season feels so difficult. You expected progress to feel exciting, but instead it feels quiet. You expected purpose to arrive with certainty, but instead it has come wrapped in questions. You expected answers, but you received waiting. Waiting has a way of exposing everything hidden inside the heart. While life is moving quickly for everyone else, waiting forces you to face fears you never knew existed. It reveals how much of your identity was attached to other people's approval. It uncovers expectations you placed upon relationships that no human being was ever meant to fulfill. It shows how easily disappointment can become despair when hope depends entirely upon visible results. Maybe that is why your prayers have become different lately. They are no longer polished. They are no longer filled with impressive words. They have become simple, honest. Sometimes all you can say is, "God, I do not understand." Sometimes your greatest act of faith is simply refusing to stop praying even when you cannot see what is changing. There is something deeply human about believing that if everyone accepted you, your heart would finally rest. Yet many people surrounded by admiration still carry profound loneliness. External acceptance cannot heal every internal wound. The human heart longs for love, belonging, and purpose, but it also longs for something deeper that cannot always be satisfied by popularity or constant companionship. That realization is painful, because it asks you to stop searching for complete security in places that were never designed to provide it. Perhaps your greatest struggle has not been being alone. Perhaps it has been believing that being alone automatically means you have been forgotten. Those are not the same thing. Loneliness can convince you that silence means absence. Yet throughout the biblical story, silence often became a place where people learned to trust God in ways they never expected. That truth does not erase pain. It does not remove grief. It does not make rejection pleasant. But it offers hope that suffering is not always meaningless. Sometimes the chapters we would gladly skip become the very chapters that shape compassion, wisdom, endurance, and humility. Think about the moments that changed you most. They were probably not the easiest days. They were the days when you discovered strengths you never knew you possessed because circumstances required them. They were the days when you realized your identity could not depend entirely upon applause, success, or the opinions of other people. Looking back, you may not be grateful for every painful experience, but perhaps you can recognize that you did not leave those experiences unchanged. There is still much to uncover about why certain seasons feel so lonely and how God can bring purpose even from places we never would have chosen ourselves. For now, hold on to this thought. Your present season does not have to define your entire story. Feeling alone today does not mean you will always remain alone. Feeling misunderstood today does not mean your life has no meaning. Even if you cannot yet understand what God is doing, you are not beyond His care, and your story is not finished. There comes a moment when you stop asking why everyone keeps leaving and begin asking a far more unsettling question. Who am I becoming because of this? That question does not erase the loneliness, but it changes the direction of your heart. Instead of staring only at the empty chairs around your life, you begin to notice something happening within you that would have been impossible to see if your life had remained crowded with constant noise and endless distractions. You remember how desperately you once wanted everyone's approval. Every compliment lifted your spirit. Every criticism shattered your confidence. Your emotions rose and fell according to how people treated you. If someone invited you, you felt valuable. If someone ignored you, you questioned your worth. Without realizing it, your identity had slowly become dependent upon other people deciding whether you belonged. Many of us have walked through that struggle. We may never say it out loud, but we quietly hope that if enough people choose us, perhaps we will finally believe we are enough. Yet that pursuit can become exhausting because people change. Expectations change, circumstances change, relationships naturally grow, drift, strengthen, or end. If our entire sense of value rests upon those changing realities, our hearts will always feel unstable. This does not mean relationships are unimportant. Scripture consistently points to the beauty of community, friendship, encouragement, and carrying one another's burdens. We were not created to reject people or to celebrate isolation as though it were automatically holy. Instead, there are seasons when God can meet us in unexpected ways, even while we experience loneliness, reminding us that our deepest identity is rooted in His love rather than in human approval. Perhaps you remember praying for certain friendships to last forever. You believed those people would walk beside you through every season. Then, almost without warning, conversations became shorter. Invitations became less frequent. The closeness that once seemed unbreakable quietly dissolved. There was no dramatic argument, no obvious betrayal, just distance that neither side seemed able to explain. That kind of ending is often harder to grieve because there is no clear answer. You keep wondering whether you should have done something differently. You replay old conversations, searching for a hidden mistake. You imagine alternate versions of the past, where one different decision might have changed everything. But some questions remain unanswered, and learning to live faithfully without every answer is one of the hardest forms of spiritual maturity. Faith is not pretending to understand everything. It is continuing to trust God's character, even while admitting that many parts of life remain mysterious. Think about how often Jesus Himself withdrew into quiet places to pray. Those moments were not signs that He rejected people. They were moments of communion with the Father before returning to love and serve others. Solitude and loneliness are not the same thing. Loneliness is the ache of missing connection. Solitude can become a place where God gently reshapes our hearts. Sometimes a lonely season slowly becomes a quiet season of renewal, because we discover that silence is no longer empty. It becomes filled with prayer, reflection, healing, and a deeper awareness of God's presence. That transformation rarely happens overnight. At first, silence feels unbearable. You reach for your phone hoping someone has remembered you. You refresh messages that never arrive. You scroll through pictures of other people's lives, wondering why everyone else appears surrounded by happiness while you feel forgotten. Comparison quietly whispers that everyone else belongs somewhere except you. Yet comparison almost always hides the full story. Behind smiling photographs are struggles you cannot see. Behind confident voices are fears they rarely admit. Every person carries unseen battles. The enemy of your peace is often not reality itself, but the story your mind begins telling you about reality. It tells you that because someone left, everyone will leave. Because one prayer remains unanswered, none of your prayers matter. Because one season feels empty, your future will remain empty forever. Those conclusions feel convincing during pain, but they are not reliable foundations upon which to build your hope. One of the most compassionate things you can do for yourself is recognize that your emotions deserve to be acknowledged without allowing them to become the final authority over your life. You can honestly tell God that you feel abandoned without concluding that He has abandoned you. You can confess that you feel forgotten without deciding that you truly are forgotten. The Psalms are filled with prayers that begin in confusion and sorrow, yet gradually move toward trust. Not because circumstances instantly improve, but because the writer remembers God's faithfulness even while still waiting. Perhaps that is where you find yourself today. You have not received every answer you hoped for. The loneliness has not completely disappeared. Some wounds still ache when certain memories return. But somewhere beneath the disappointment, there remains a quiet desire to keep believing that your life has purpose beyond what you can currently see. If that desire still exists, even in the smallest measure, do not dismiss it. Sometimes hope survives as a tiny ember long before it becomes a steady flame again. Protect that ember. Bring it honestly before God. Let Him meet you there. And if this message reminds you of a season you have already begun to emerge from, share a small part of your story in the comments. Someone reading your words may discover the courage to keep going simply because they realize they are not walking this road alone. The journey from confusion to clarity is rarely immediate. More often, it happens through countless ordinary moments when you choose to trust one day at a time. You choose to pray again after yesterday's disappointment. You choose kindness after rejection. You choose forgiveness after hurt. You choose hope when despair seems easier. Those choices may feel small, but over time they shape a heart that is becoming stronger, wiser, more compassionate, and more deeply rooted in God's enduring love. The full meaning of your present season may still be hidden from you, but that does not mean it is without meaning. Sometimes we only recognize the quiet work God has been doing after we have already walked through the valley and discover that somehow we did not walk through it alone. Eventually, you may look back on this season and realize that the greatest change was not that your circumstances suddenly became perfect, but that your heart was no longer defined by them. The loneliness that once convinced you that your story was ending gradually became the place where a quieter, deeper confidence began to grow. Not confidence that every prayer would be answered exactly as you imagined. Not confidence that every relationship would be restored. Not confidence that life would become free from disappointment. Instead, it became confidence that God's faithfulness does not depend upon how clearly you can see the next chapter. There is a remarkable difference between living with certainty about the future and living with trust in the one who holds the future. We often long for the first, while Scripture gently leads us toward the second. Perhaps that is why some of the most meaningful moments of spiritual growth are almost invisible while they are happening. No applause follows them. No dramatic announcement declares that everything has changed. They unfold quietly. One morning you realize you no longer wake up carrying the same bitterness you once carried. One afternoon you notice that someone else's success no longer makes you question your own worth. One evening you discover that silence no longer frightens you because it has become a place where you have learned to bring your honest heart before God. Those are not small victories. They are evidence that transformation often happens beneath the surface long before it becomes visible to anyone else. Looking back, you may even recognize that some doors closing protected you from becoming someone you were never meant to be. Certain friendships may have ended not because either person was entirely right or entirely wrong, but because seasons change. Some people walk with us for a chapter, others remain for a lifetime. Learning to release relationships with gratitude instead of resentment is one of the most difficult forms of maturity. It does not mean pretending the loss did not hurt. It means refusing to let the pain become the defining sentence of your life. The same is true of unanswered questions. You may never fully understand why certain opportunities disappeared, why particular prayers seem to remain unanswered, or why some seasons lasted far longer than you expected. Yet the absence of complete understanding does not require the absence of hope. Throughout history, countless believers have discovered that God's presence often became most precious, not after every mystery was solved, but while they continued walking through the mystery itself. Faith has never meant possessing every answer. It has meant trusting God's character when the answers remain incomplete. Perhaps that is where your heart is being invited today, not to ignore your grief, not to deny your loneliness, not to pretend that rejection feels pleasant. God welcomes honest prayers. He is not threatened by your questions or disappointed by your tears. The Bible repeatedly shows people bringing their deepest confusion before Him with remarkable honesty. Their stories remind us that sincere faith is not the absence of struggle, but the willingness to keep turning toward God in the middle of it. Maybe you have been measuring your life by what has been lost instead of by what God is patiently cultivating within you. Consider the compassion that has grown because you know what it feels like to be overlooked. Consider the patience that has developed because waiting has become familiar. Consider the humility that has emerged because you learned how little control you truly possess. Consider the empathy that now allows you to recognize hidden pain in other people because you have carried hidden pain yourself. These qualities are rarely formed in seasons of constant comfort. They often grow quietly through trials that, at the time, seem to have no purpose at all. One day someone may sit across from you carrying the very loneliness that once overwhelmed your own heart. They may describe feeling invisible, forgotten, misunderstood and exhausted. In that moment you will not merely offer advice, you will offer understanding. Your compassion will not come from theory but from experience. You will be able to say in your own way that you know what it feels like to wonder whether anyone truly sees you, and you will also be able to testify that even during those seasons, God remained faithful. Your story may become a source of comfort, not because your life was free from suffering, but because God met you within it. That possibility does not erase today's pain, but it gives today's pain a horizon beyond itself. Before this message comes to an end, pause for a moment and think about how far you have already come. There were days you believed you would never survive, yet here you are. There were nights when you cried yourself to sleep, wondering whether tomorrow would feel any lighter, yet somehow you kept going. There were disappointments that convinced you your faith would collapse, yet even through uncertainty, something continued drawing you back to God. Perhaps it was not your own strength that carried you after all. Perhaps His grace was quietly sustaining you, even when you did not recognize it. If this message has spoken to your heart, share in the comments one lesson God has been teaching you during your own season of waiting or loneliness. Your words may become an unexpected encouragement for someone who desperately needs hope today. And as you leave this moment, remember this above everything else. Your value has never depended upon how many people understand you. Your purpose has never depended upon constant approval. Your hope has never depended upon perfect circumstances. You are loved by a faithful God, whose presence is not limited by your emotions, whose compassion is not exhausted by your weakness, and whose grace remains available even when your path feels uncertain. You may still have questions tomorrow. You may still experience moments of loneliness. There will likely be days when the road ahead seems hidden again, but you do not have to believe that every difficult season is meaningless. You can continue walking with the quiet confidence that God is able to bring growth from waiting, peace from surrender, wisdom from hardship, and hope from places that once seemed empty. Your story is still unfolding. The chapter you are living now is important, but it is not the conclusion. The God who has remained faithful through every page already knows the ending, and because of that, you can keep taking the next step in faith, trusting that even when you cannot yet see the full picture, you are never beyond His loving care.